We have a great lineup of panelists assembled for you all, and I will turn it over to our moderator, Andrea Mazzocco, who is the Workforce Development Ecosystems Deputy Leader at Deloitte. Andrea, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And hopefully you can hear me okay. It's great being with you all today, although that is a tough act to follow. We will do our best to keep you all engaged before we have the pleasure of heading out to the happy hour later this evening. But for now, we are going to be talking about a critical topic around workforce development. And we're going to focus in on that with regards to the semiconductor industry. As mentioned, I'm our Workforce Development Ecosystem Deputy Leader at Deloitte, which is a lot of words, which is my way of saying that I work with state and local governments, nonprofits, and higher education and community colleges as well to really solve some of the different talent shortages that we're seeing in virtually every industry in the US. The semiconductor industry is of a passion of mine because I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And we have had the pleasure of Intel also investing in our state and in our town. And it's been wonderful to see the economic growth that is happening because of that investment. So excited to moderate this discussion today. And I'm going to go ahead and ask my fellow panelists here to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Carlos.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. You guys hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a great topic for us to hopefully send you to happy hour and we can have some more conversations there. So Carlos Contreras from the Office of Economic Opportunity. Our office does 4 main functions. We do the workforce planning for the state of Arizona. We have our state demographer's office, our state economist's office, so any type of job reports, projections, and then we also have the Arizona Finance Authority. In terms of my background, I'm about to show a bit of my age. So my father was an electrical engineer. He worked for Motorola in the 1970s, mid-1975 in Nogales, Mexico. I remember seeing my first wafer when I was 6 years old. It was about this small. And I was able to get a couple of spare ones from my dad so I can use them as mirrors in my bike. So that was my first exposure for semiconductors. And in terms of the Valley, the first investment that came to Arizona was in 1949. So this industry's been around for over 75 years. It was Motorola, again, back in 75 with a research lab that got started here. 1980, Intel showed up. I don't know when I became the historian on this now. I guess it's my background. In 1980, Intel showed up and just exploded in terms of the industry itself here in Arizona. And in 2006, they built a second campus, and I actually met a journeyman from the trades that worked on that first factory. Needless to say, you know, the point of this history in terms of Arizona is we know how to build fabs, and Sean will talk about this in terms of our trades. They know how to build fabs. We have workforce capability. We have very strong universities, as the governor mentioned, and very collaborative environments with our community colleges, which I'll talk about. And as the governor mentioned, we have over $100 billion in investment, which is for us, the challenge is unprecedented investment, also great workforce opportunities for folks. And our challenge is how do we make these opportunities available to as many people as possible? Thank you.
Excellent. Over to Sarah. I think it was on already.
Can you hear me?
Oh, it has to be up.
Hear me now.
There you go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sarah Means. I am the Semiconductor Manager for Governor Tina Kotek in Oregon. You might be wondering why the governor has a Semiconductor Manager. It's not normal. I don't know that there's another one of me across the states, but I came on board about a year ago to implement the Oregon CHIPS Act, which was developed as a result of the Federal CHIPS and Science Act. So I manage a program, about a $250 million program, to provide direct incentive investment to companies, semiconductor companies in Oregon, or those wanting to come to Oregon. So that's my day job. We also have another $250 million of tax abatement to semiconductor companies. And so over the last year, Oregon has invested about $500 million. And if anybody knows Oregon, they'll know that's unusual for us. So we're very proud of this. We're very proud of investing in the semiconductor industry in Oregon, which has been there since about the mid-70s, starting with Intel, of course. And we've developed that ecosystem over that 40 plus years. So I'll stop there and let Amber.
All right. Speaking of Intel, let's go to Amber. Flip it.
Hello. So I'm Amber Wiseley. I'm part of the Intel team. I sit in our Folsom campus, which is in California, just outside Sacramento, but have had the pleasure to visit the Arizona campus several times and the Oregon campus several times, and lived in Oregon actually for about a year. And I got my master's degree at ASU doing a hybrid program before hybrid was the term we all used, through ASU, coming down to visit occasionally and then doing a lot of the program online. So I've been in Intel for over 20 years, and most of that time has been in our HR function and specifically our total rewards function, focusing on compensation and benefits. And I head up all of our global benefit programs, among other, several other programs. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about this very important topic. Thank you.
All right. And lastly, down to Sean.
Yeah. Okay, good. Morning. That's morning. It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Sean Hutchinson. I'm the director for the Phoenix Electrical JATC Apprenticeship Program. We are the union-sponsored program for the Phoenix market. Basically, we are training jurisdiction ranges everywhere from down to Casa Grande all the way up to the northern borders and across the state. But the majority of our apprentices are learning the trade right here in the Phoenix and Maricopa County area. In particular, on a lot of our chip manufacturing fabs. I'm not a public speaker. I'm an electrician. I run a training program and for electricians, and I see a lot of familiar faces in here in the workforce development space, and I really appreciate all of our relationships throughout the years and trying to get Arizona's workforce prepared for what we have today, which is organized chaos. And I am joking with that. It has been a long time coming. We have been talking about worker shortages in the construction industry since the early 2000s. We've had a lot of things happen to us, since these discussions have been talked about and studied, and plans put together, plans fall apart. But basically, in the last 4 or 5 years, our program which is larger than every other electrical training program combined. Our program has grown over 400% in the last 4 or 5 years. We are looking to grow again by a significant number in the next few years. The jobs and the opportunities for electricians in particular, with all of these, the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. All of these acts have construction dollars in there that have heavy apprenticeship language in there to make sure that we are training the next generation of electricians and other trades. But I think I'll talk about electricians because I think they're the most important. But to Carlos's point, I'm a product of apprenticeship training. That is, with the exception of one semester of college, that my parents were scratching their heads because I wanted to be a TV weatherman back in the day. All of my post-secondary education is apprenticeship training, and I am like I said, I'm a product of that program. And to Carlos's earlier point, a lot of my later years in apprenticeship were in the chip manufacturing fabs in Motorola and in the very, very early days of Intel in the Ocotillo campus down in the south, back in I think it was about 94, where Intel's big idea of this Fab 12 was coming out of the ground, and it was the next best thing, and it was taking up, well, all of the electricians on my site decided to go down there. They were, well, quite frankly, paying more. But we definitely saw, the beginnings of just an enormous expansion over the last, 20 and 30 years. And it shows no sign of stopping the growth, which really taxes, our state's apprenticeship training program. So thanks again for having me. This is really cool to be here. So, all right. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. All right. So let's just start with some context setting about the semiconductor workforce. I would love to hear, and we've started to hear a little bit about that from Sean, but let's first go to Carlos and then maybe Sean can weigh in and maybe Amber as well. How would you all characterize the semiconductor workforce? What does it look like from an occupation standpoint, training standpoint? Would love to hear.
Yeah, I think the first thing that you see, and we're seeing this right now with TSMC and with Intel, is all the construction that needs to happen, right? So we need lots of construction workers. That's the big first challenge, is to get enough of that workforce. And the governor mentioned her Build It AZ initiative in terms of a way to address that opportunity. It's an opportunity to get more people, good paying jobs, but also it's a challenge in terms of how we get there. So I think that's the first one. Then you start getting into technicians, folks that work in the factory itself, engineers, process engineers, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, all sorts of engineers, data engineers, because there is a lot of data that these factories produce. So a lot of data analytical folks, a lot of chemistry. And then you get into research and development in terms of PhDs, folks that are trying to figure out what to do with these elements in the periodic table that nobody hears about, try to figure out how we can use this to extend, the industry likes to use Moore's law in terms to extend that cadence of process improvements and process reduction so that you get better devices every year. And then you have finance, administration jobs, maintenance, right? All sorts of the other stuff that every single industry uses. And then you have the supply chain, right? So these companies come with a lot of suppliers and a huge supply chain. Transportation, logistics, I mean, you name it. So when we look at an industry like this, we have to pay attention to all the other cross sections that it impacts. And construction just happened to be kind of like one that hit our radar right away, and which is why we launched that.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Sean, anything more to add there on how we characterize the workforce in the semiconductor industry?
No, I mean, Carlos obviously captured a lot of the various tracks that are needed, and the training programs that are needed to support those tracks. There is a real shortage in Arizona. It continues to be a real concern for anyone that's studying the policies that surround the development of the workforce there. But from the construction standpoint, I mean, construction in particular, even though it represents a relatively small percentage of what the Arizona employment economy looks like, it has a huge impact on the ability to grow these various sectors because of our impact on to be able to build these buildings, build these factories. I mean, the processes to work inside of these fabs and the clean rooms, and we're construction workers. We make dust, we make all kinds of dirt and noise and all that, and it's really disruptive to obviously a semiconductor process. So specialized training and specialized processes need to be employed. So yeah.
Yeah. Great. So we've kind of level setted that the workforce in the semiconductor industry is quite diverse, and especially as you start to think about the supply chain, the more support services behind that. So want to hear from, let's go first to Amber. Given this range, what are the essential elements of a well-functioning talent pipeline for this industry? And what entry points really need to exist for students and workers to come into these different career paths?
Well, from the angle of what makes a great program, I think it's a few things. One is we want to make sure we're investing in our communities and investing in that pipeline, investing in the youth, but also investing in the current workforce who has, we want to make sure they have the opportunity to continue to reskill, grow, have a learning mindset. So we are looking at programs on both sides, externally and internally, when we think about that what we need from the talent pipeline. Think about one thing about Intel is we invest heavily in our community. So over the last 5 years, we've invested over $250 million in that pipeline, and thinking about how we can set different curriculum programs, how we can work with our partner agencies, whether it's at a local level, a state level, working directly with the universities or directly with K through 12 institutions. We're really working to figure out what we can do to create curriculum that's exciting and intriguing. And that's in the STEAM fields and the STEM fields, but it's also in business. It's also thinking about the broader industry, like Andrea was just saying, right? It's very broad in terms of the type of talent that we're looking for. So we're looking for science and engineering, of course, but we're also looking for a broader skill set.
Great. And maybe Sean, you too could, from your training provider standpoint, could weigh in on that question on those essential elements of a well-functioning talent pipeline for this industry.
From a state perspective, I think the concentration of support and resources to our state CTE programs and getting these kids interested in careers in various occupations like what Amber just mentioned, and in particular the construction trades, because again I'm favor that, but it is a wide variety of direction that the CTE program should be tasked with, and resources need to be continued to be supplied to.
Can I
I was going to just go to you, Carlos. I saw you ready.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges is you have a lot of people that are doing really good, but they're working in pockets in isolation. So, and the governor talked about this in terms of convening people, bringing people together to collaborate. And so a sign of whether something is effective is you have all the stakeholders in the room, and you have like a joint goal. You all are going in the same direction, but everyone's contributing different pieces to it, and that is a lot of coordination, and that is a lot of work, and this has to be very intentional. And so I think for getting the community colleges, getting, as Sean mentioned, the CTE programs, the nonprofits, the wraparound services that folks need, and then looking at these issues that are coming up like childcare, like how do we address all these different barriers that give opportunities for everyone to participate in this industry, and that it's a very it's a contact sport. It's very involved, and it requires a lot of coordination.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a great segue into the next topic that I want to talk with you all about. And I think, Sarah, this will be a good one for you. So we at Deloitte talk a lot about, and we even named our practice after this concept of the workforce development ecosystem, and the need to really bring together government, education, industry, community-based organizations, your training partners, your labor unions. So really make that, I love this concept of a contact sport and very collaborative. From a state government perspective, with you sitting in the governor's office, I'd love to hear from you on how states can effectively coordinate that ecosystem within and across borders, because I think that's what's really interesting, especially in these emerging industries like the semiconductor space, where we know there are 3 other states outside of Oregon, or 3 other states outside of Arizona that are getting a lot of investment. So what can state governments do to better coordinate that ecosystem and for the long term, not just the short term?
Yeah, well, I can speak to a specific program that we have in Oregon. It's called Future Ready Oregon. It was passed a couple of years ago under Governor Brown's leadership, and Governor Kotek is continuing on with that and implementing the program. It's a couple $100 million investment, and really it is about coordinating all of the different partners and stakeholders that need to be at the table. So for example, we have some targeted industries identified for Future Ready Oregon. Healthcare is one. one, technology is another, and then manufacturing is one. And so I happen to sit on the, I think we're actually calling it Advanced Manufacturing Consortium, where we know there's an interface with the semiconductor workforce system. But it's not just semiconductor, right? It really is more broad than that. And I think that's speaks to how do we provide an opportunity and education and collaboration around making sure we have a base level of skill that can then be taken into the fab or into the plant, whatever the advanced manufacturing subsector is. But the point is, everybody that needs to be at that table is at that table coordinating, whether it's community colleges, four-year universities, the employers are leading this effort, which I think is really key. It's if some of you are familiar with sector strategy work, it really is at its core sector strategy work, because the industry is leading the conversation, and we're making sure that the connections are made such that if an employer, the industry needs to pivot, and we need higher education to pivot, and they can do that pretty seamlessly. So I think that's a really great example of how a state can lean in and sort of set the table and allow industry to lead in a really productive and effective way.
Thank you for that. I love that. Carlos, do you have anything more to add from a state government perspective before we talk about some of the other players in that ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, the governor mentioned we have a registered apprenticeship program for semiconductors, right? So a registered apprenticeship program is portable. So that's something that can travel, and that's something that we've spoken to some of the companies, especially some of our local semiconductor companies that have these programs in other states. And how do we help coordinate that? Because a technician in Ohio is probably for Intel is probably gonna need to know the same as what they do in Arizona. So having some portability there, also helping connect the community colleges together and the experts, the educators. We haven't gone down to the CTE level yet, which is probably something that we need to do. But there are different levers that we can look at, the workforce dollars that are coming down in terms of the plan. What does a 4-year plan look like for the state? Where do semiconductors come in? Just looking at different states and their plans. So I think there's mechanisms there, but a lot of it is really goes back again to coordination and stakeholder engagement and being very specific about the type of things that you want to collaborate on. Yeah.
Love that. That's great. And so then going down to you, Amber, from an employer perspective, and we think about the employer's role in that workforce development ecosystem. How do you think about that, or how does Intel really think about that in the co-development and then the retention of talent, especially when you're going into these different communities?
I think it's a really important to have private and public partnership and collaboration on these topics. Speaking of the example of, creating curriculum that can be used across states, I think, what we need to do as an organization, as a collective group, is we need to think about how to be very efficient with that creation. And so, we don't need to make a program duplicative, right? We can we can grow it at scale. We can create something that will work for multiple states, for multiple communities. And I just think we need to think a little bit differently about how we grow the curriculum and how we think about it, and how we really, just work together and have these different kind of communication together than maybe we have in the past. So I think that's something that I know Intel is interested in, and I know we're absolutely engaged in right now. And then from a retention perspective, we think that it's essential, again, to continue to grow skills. So once you're in the door, that's not where it stops. There's still a significant amount of progression to be able to have within a company. And the more a company can lay out that progression and can lay out the career opportunities, the better, I think, the diversity of the talent will be, the interest will be higher. Yeah. And, I think that's where we get a lot of growth and innovation, is because people do have understanding of different roles and different parts of the business, and you can build off of that and you can feed off of that. And so I think that's just something that, from a retention perspective, is really essential to be thinking about how you talk about career development, how you bring that alive, and how we can inspire people to think it's not just about the first job that somebody's going after, but what the job could be in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. We still have several employees that have, decades here at Intel. And that's true, not just at Intel, but across the industry. People can come here and make, lifelong careers. And I'm a personal testament to that, but, there's several others. And that goes not just in the business side, but also in the technology and the science and engineering side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So then last sort of representative of the ecosystem that we have on the panel, Sean, you represent more of that training provider. Could you talk a little bit of what role education and training providers play in this ecosystem in the semiconductor industry?
Sure. I know Andrea just mentioned about the support that Intel provides to a lot of its training programs and advancing its employees, and it really is a model that we share in the subcontracting side of things. It's a little bit more of a transient workforce. It's very tough in construction to have to invest in people, knowing that we change employers all the time, and places like Intel and TSMC and, well, back in the day, Motorola are our customers, are our employers' customers. So it's a little bit of a removed scenario that we look at, but we are definitely a model of employer supported collaborative efforts. So it's a shared workforce. We have an association of contractors that shares resources, provides those resources to their collective training program. And of course, having a joint apprenticeship and training committee, the West Coast states, they're very, very familiar with that. The California, Oregon, Washington. I know Arizona, since the Hobbs administration came in, and of course with the Biden administration coming in with all of their programs, it's absolutely great experience to have that that attention paid to you. I don't think I've ever been invited to a group like this prior in prior years. And I've been at this for a very long time. I've been in the apprenticeship system since 1996, and I don't remember ever having so much attention paid to apprenticeship training in the state of Arizona as I do today, which has really been great. And we're starting to see the resources. We are starting to see the like I said, the attention paid. I mentioned the growth of the active participants in our program, which is around 1,000 now, and we're looking to be probably in the mid 12 to 1,500 participants in coming years. But the applications are really indicative of the efforts the state's made in drawing attention to apprenticeship training and the valuable careers that it provides to its participants. So our applications are, they really are growing enormously every year.
Oh, it's a good problem to have, I would say.
They keep telling me that. I don't remember having these problems back in the day when it was a little slower. I didn't sign up for this.
Well, you're doing great. All right. So we've talked about these different players in the ecosystem, right? But let's take a moment to really center the workforce here and talk a little bit about some of the barriers or challenges that they may face in actually taking advantage of the various career paths available in the semiconductor industry or in those secondary, tertiary industries that come along with it. Would love if anyone really on the panel would like to talk about some of the barriers or challenges that they've seen with this workforce. I know, Amber, you've got some great items to talk about with regards to childcare. So maybe we can start there, but would also be happy to touch on other barriers or challenges that we're seeing.
Childcare is definitely a barrier for many people. Regardless of industry, right? The cost of childcare, the supply side of the childcare component is definitely creating difficulties for people to enter the workforce and to stay in the workforce. So, we're very aware of that. At Intel, we think childcare is an essential component of a benefits package, and we think that more and more employers should be sponsoring it and will be sponsoring it in the coming days and months and years, I hope. Some of the barriers around childcare, their affordability, reliability, quality, access. And so when we think about what's another employer need to do to help address that, we think along those lines. And we think you can address reliability with backup care, programs, access and quality with partnerships with your, local providers in the area, coming up with ways to help keep that quality, that bar, that standard really high, and making sure we're vetting for great quality of care. From an affordability perspective, we think we can help, whether it's a discount program, whether it's a reimbursement or a subsidy program, or whether it's, just simply facilitating the dependent care tax advantage programs that exist, flexible savings accounts. Those types of things, when you can do any or you can do all, really can make a difference in combating the barrier of childcare. And we think it's going to really, in the next few years, being able to go after the diversity of the talent that we're looking to and to bring more women into the workforce. We think this is really absolutely a critical component of what we need to do, again, in this private and public partnerships. And we need to really, again, work collectively on this problem. I don't think employers can do it all. I don't think governments can do it all. I think we need to find some happy medium where we're all coming together to solve the problem. But I think if we can chip at it a little bit, then I think we can really make strides to reduce some of these barriers and get more people into the workforce and to combat the talent shortage that exists right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, do you want to jump in on that as well?
Yeah, I would love to. So childcare is a big deal for us in Oregon, as it is everywhere, but the entire state of Oregon, I believe, is a childcare desert. Last week, Governor Kotek had the privilege of announcing a investment into a childcare program that was created in this last legislative session in Oregon, and that she signed the bill a couple of weeks ago. But last week she announced an additional investment into that fund. We're calling it the Oregon CHIPS Childcare Fund because we need another Oregon CHIPS or CHIPS program fund name in the state. But she announced a $5 million investment into that fund, in addition to the $2.5 million that the legislature appropriated. That fund really specifically addresses the construction workforce challenges and is an offset in cost for apprenticeships. Specifically, it's modeled after an existing program in Oregon for highway construction apprentice workers, where it's a voucher system that goes directly to the provider, not to the employee, and so it doesn't have tax consequences to the employee as well. So it's a really important program. We've seen huge success on the highway side, and expect to see just as much success on the semiconductor side. So these are for semiconductor apprenticeships. In addition, that legislation also created a fund for infrastructure, childcare infrastructure, and really addressing the supply of infrastructure. So we're excited to get moving on that. We're actually developing a work group that will then look at making recommendations for the CHIPS companies that have received direct incentive to maybe contribute to that program. So more to come on that. What I'll also say is more broadly than just the semiconductor workforce, but in the 2023 legislative session, Business Oregon was tasked with and provided $50 million with a childcare infrastructure program as well. And so over the last two legislative sessions, we've spent a lot of time talking about childcare, and I expect we will continue to do that because we know it is a primary barrier for many in entering the workforce. And we want to make sure we're eliminating those barriers as best we can.
Yeah, that's great. Carlos, you want to add a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the challenge is in, I had a great career at Intel. I worked there for 26 years, so I know what like a job like that means for people. And Amber mentioned this in terms of having a pathway for people to just start in the industry. You start in the industry, you perform, you get rewarded, you get more training, you move on, and you create more and more opportunities for yourself, right? So the thing that keeps me up at night is we have a lot of people that don't know anything about these jobs. They don't have an idea of how to get in there because they don't have the social network. I had a social network to help me with that. And so programs like a Quick Start program where it's 2 weeks, and that actually came from Oregon, I think, originally. And then we brought it down to Arizona. programs like that where you get folks that don't have a connection to the industry. They get exposed to it. They talk to the professionals, and then they get a shot at moving on, to get a 2-year degree or get an interview depending on what's going on. So I think we need to do more of those things, because this is, as the governor mentioned, we have unprecedented investment coming in, and this is the time to get people into really good paying jobs. And we have to go try these creative ways of getting people into these jobs.
That's great. That's great. Oh, Sean, you want to add in a little bit more? I would
Love to
hear.
just compliment the governor's office and the attention that they pay to this. And I know that she's going to be the one to come up with a solution on this. I could tell you, we make great efforts to make sure our program reflects the society it serves. We're a majority program. We did have a pretty large cross section of female participants in a very non-traditional role of, female in construction is still a barrier that has been tough to address, in particular in some areas of the country, including Arizona. Quite honestly, I came up at a different time. I was able to go to work every minute of overtime that was made available to me. And my wife was able to stay at home with our kids. We're very traditional about that. And the economy is very, very different today. And that's just, quite frankly, not possible anymore, unfortunately. And add to that, in construction, we start our day a little earlier than everyone else. And, it's not necessarily, our industry is studying this. They have a study group where we're looking at ways to, provide benefits to our single parents, both male and female single parents that are, struggling with this. But, the problem is cost, and it is reliability, and the quality and all that is all there, but it's also availability, to drop your kids off at 3 a.m. to be at your job site at 4:30. It's not that practical, and it's a difficult position. Unfortunately, a majority of our female participants puts them in a very, very difficult position. So I'm really, I've heard the governor speak on this on a number of occasions. I know that it's going to be her administration that, solves this. Appreciate that.
Great. Excellent. Okay. So those are the questions that I was hoping to ask you all. I'd like to now open the floor to broader discussion, and then may come back to another question or two. But does anyone have? All right here, we've got a question.
This may be a different workforce that we're talking about, but we're experiencing, I'm talking about agriculture and farming and ranching. We're experiencing a difficult time in terms of getting farm labor force. And I know that H-2As have been part of the solution with regard to agriculture. I'm wondering, I know that you probably have had to get H-1Bs. Can anyone speak to that, and how we are going to resolve this labor shortage, which is not just in terms of technology, but also in terms of, we need farm workers that are able to plant, cultivate, and harvest.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have them, and we're having extreme difficulty, and politicians are having a field day with regard in terms of filling their campaign chest with the border issues. Since Arizona is definitely a border issue, you're in play. Thank you.
So anyone want to speak to H-1B? Anything that's been going on there in order to address worker shortages?
I'd probably look to the state offices for this one.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's like an employer driven thing, right? In terms of employers filling out those applications and requesting those types of workers. Our responsibility is, okay, like, where do we find talent? Like, where does this industry, what do they need? Where are things not working? Is it a training issue? Is it like an awareness issue? Is there some skills that we need a skills program that we need to develop? So that's the side that, we our office tries to look into and attack.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Oh, over here.
This is for Sarah and Amber. How did you get around the liability issue for childcare? We've been struggling with that in the county.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So these are well-established programs that are voucher systems that go directly to in-home providers or facilities, licensed facilities, all of which need to be licensed. Even the in-home providers go through our Department of Early Learning and Childcare. And so that is probably how the insurance requirements are met through that certification.
Choose where they want to go, and then that voucher goes wherever they go.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. What about Intel?
Yeah, Intel's similar. We don't have any on-site childcare center, so we're working through the local community providers. We'll of course vet them and make sure they're meeting the highest standards and compliance requirements, but we're not facilitating the actual facility at this point in time. Although I will say we absolutely understand it's very much a challenge on the supply side. And I think when we talk about some of these funds and we think about where the funding can go for infrastructure, I think insurance is one of the areas that we need to think through in terms of the liability insurance, the wages that we are paying the childcare providers, again, the quick start, how can we get more people educated quick enough to be able to be certified and to actually meet the compliance requirements? So I think there's a lot that needs to happen on the supply side that, again, if we can come together in a private and public forum, I think we can help influence, but I think doing it alone is going to be tough.
Real quick, I'll just say we have a program. So I'm from Eugene in Oregon, and we have a program ran by Child Care Catalyst in our local economic development agency there. And it's an accelerator program for child care providers. So it helps them sort of learn all of the regulatory issues that they need to understand, gets them pointed in the right direction, helps them through their licensing, all within a very short period of time. I want to say it's a couple of weeks, but it could be a little bit longer than that. So it's providing them that support. I'll just say I'm part of my work is negotiating contracts with these chips companies, right? And we're having direct conversations around how the chips companies can support programs like that, because it will directly benefit them and their employees when there's more childcare providers on the ground in the areas where they have facilities.
Great.
Yeah, that's a never ending. Childcare is never ending. Yeah. Question more for Amber, maybe, but the rest of you, how do you lean into the communities that you're working in for them to accept different perspectives? Or like somebody mentioned the private public partnerships. We have some rural communities where we have larger companies coming in and almost, they're building housing for their employees. They're running the local grocery store, so they keep it in line. So where have you seen the best practices to lean into supporting those private public partnerships and working with your communities?
That's a great question. I haven't heard of those. Well, I've heard of the housing, of course, but I hadn't heard of the grocery store, so I'll have to keep that on our list. I think, the way, we've got a team in place, one of them sitting out here in the audience, Michelle, who works really closely on building relationships with the community and actually working with our Chamber of Commerce, partners and working with various nonprofits. So I think the most fundamental part of building the relationship is just being there, talking through issues, working together to solve the problem. So for me, that's fundamental, is keep open dialogue. In terms of other solutions, like in the childcare study that's happening here in Arizona, this is an example, I think, that we have great partnership because we were asked to participate in that study. So I think the more states invite participation and dialogue from private sector, the better it will be, because we've been able to give input. I'm sure many others have been able to give input. And now we're looking forward to those results. And when those results come in, we're going to work together on what some of those next steps might be able to be. So I think it takes dialogue both ways. If we get invited, we'll participate, and we can invite and solicit more input and again, come together to solve these problems. The CHIPS Act at the federal level was another example of that. It's a federal and not local, but it's another example where if we come together and start talking through the issues and we get people thinking and getting creative about how we might solve some of these problems, I think that's really the first step.
Do y'all have anything else to add there?
No, just an example of a private public partnership that came out of the governor's operating in terms of her mantra is collaborate, get together, talk through the tough issues, right? So through the Build at AZ, for example, right? TSMC out of that invested $15 million with the local there's a pipe trades, right, to create a more capacity for more training for 1,000 apprentices. So unless you bring people together, they don't talk about the issues, but if you bring people together, they talk about issues, and sometimes you end up landing into a solution that benefits everyone, right? And that's a great example. But you have to have the courage to sometimes bring people together that probably might not be talking to each other at that point in time, but if you bring them together, there's a common set of values, there's a common set of outcomes that you all want, and you can get to a solution like that.
Great. Other questions? Oh, I see a hand over here.
Hi, Taniqua Hay, Department of Energy. And this for Carlos or anyone else on the panel, with workforce challenges and quickly skilling up for different technologies. Do you have any examples of some of these collaborations or partnerships that worked well, especially even with the companies that came together to address some of these needs?
Yeah. I think the stuff that we talked about, the Quick Start program, the registered apprenticeship for semiconductors, for the state, battery manufacturers are coming into the state. I think we have 3 big investments throughout the state: one in Pima County, down in Tucson, one in the west side of town, and then in Pinal County. That is an opportunity to get that industry that's just growing up and look at the commonalities that we have with like other advanced manufacturing, like semiconductor, and build a model with them from the start, from scratch. So we just submitted a Department of Labor grant to create an Arizona apprenticeship hub. And we have like 4 different industries that said we're interested in helping out. Semiconductors is one of them, but battery manufacturing is another one, where if we get this funding, then we're going to launch with these companies, we're going to launch some new registered apprenticeship programs and work with the community colleges or local workforce boards, the nonprofits, to the earlier point about bringing all the different constituencies around the table. So I hope we get that grant, and then maybe a year from now, we can be talking about some new programs for that industry.
Sarah or Amber would love to hear from you all on any rapid upskilling programs.
Yeah, this is actually a Future Ready Oregon investment with local community college, Mount Hood Community College out of just outside of Portland. They partnered with 2 of our local semiconductor companies, onsemi and Microchip, and are doing a mobile training unit where they go to the actual facilities and are training existing employees, upskilling existing employees on site. These employees aren't, it's part of their day. It's not in addition to, and so it's really attractive for the employees there that see a career path. And I think it really, contributes to a retention effort as well, right? Because it's important to those employees, obviously, if they're taking time to continue to move forward in their careers, and the companies are doing it and paying for it as well. So that's been a very successful program. It's only, I think this is in the 2nd year So very new still, but seeing huge success. They had to create numerous wait lists in order because the capacity was small. They didn't know how it was going to come off. They didn't know what the demand would be, and they're quickly having to figure out how to expand that capacity.
Great. And then Amber, I saw you were going to jump into.
Yeah, I just might add that the apprenticeship program for us has been really successful. So that's a great example. The Quick Start program, another really great example. For us, we also have internships. We're co-creating curriculum in various universities across the nation and at, again, high school and other institutions. So we're working at a very local level to do several of those things. And we've got mentorship programs, we've got internship programs. So I think the more, again, that the local community can work with the local businesses and figure out what's working for the specific workforce there. And at my home site is in Folsom, California. We don't have manufacturing at that site, but we have our design components, we have business components, we have supply chain. So in our local area, we, of course, the youth have the opportunity to learn manufacturing and to have that as a pathway, but they're also looking at other parts of the business that, are relevant for that particular site. So I think, again, when we think about how to duplicate efforts and scale efforts, we don't have to have everything unique to the particular site. We can have them be, they can relate to the site. So those are just a few. There's many that have been great though.
Excellent. Yeah, Sean, you want to weigh in?
So to the point of creating these apprenticeships for these emerging markets and energy projects and things like that. I mean, I know the state of Arizona has been very, very innovative about creating apprenticeable occupations and creating and monitoring apprenticeships for each of these. We're a little bit wary about that. By definition, apprenticeship should be a job and education simultaneously. And I know there's occupations that might have an apprenticeship already, that is established that covers that scope of work. But the state has really, I mean, they have defined about 140 apprenticeable occupations, and have worked within industry, worked with employers, worked with labor groups, and I think have done a really good job of addressing emerging markets and pushing toward creating apprenticeships to make that a successful training model for these growing industries that are coming into the state. And I think they've really set the stage for a model for the country to take a look at, because they really do they do a really, really good job, I think.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, I just want to say, I think the name of the game today and the theme has been collaboration. And so it's been great to hear from folks kind of across that ecosystem, so to speak. I would love to just pass it to each of you if you have any concluding thoughts that you would like to share with the group as we wrap up this topic on workforce development in the semiconductor industry.
No, just want to thank you for this opportunity. And for those of you who are coming from outside the state, make sure that you drink a lot of water. So I'm just my own piece of advice.
Yes, coming from Oregon. It's quite warm out there. Just thanks for having me, and thanks for allowing me to highlight some of the good work in Oregon. We're very proud of what we're doing up there, and always looking for opportunities to collaborate across state lines. So thanks for your attention and support, and happy to be here.
Great.
Maybe I'll just close with a couple of comments about the semiconductor industry and the workforce. When we think about the CHIPS Act funding, the amount of jobs that we're adding into the ecosystem are, it's really an unfathomable number. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So for Intel, we're expecting to have over 10,000 jobs added in the next couple of years, over 20,000 construction jobs. And we think it's going to be over 50,000 jobs in the broader ecosystem, whether that be our suppliers, whether that be hospitality or retail. And we think the jobs are very exciting at Intel, but that's only at Intel. We also have CHIPS Act funding that's affecting the broader industry, and those numbers are going to be so much more. We have a ratio in our industry of, for every one job, we have about 6.5 jobs that we add into the broader ecosystem. So when we think about this CHIPS Act funding at large, what we're doing on this economic development and the number of jobs that we're producing is, again, it's almost unfathomable to think about this growth and the programs like these apprenticeships programs, the partnerships we're having with the different state organizations. I think we're just really at a very exciting time in our country. And I think it's something we should all be excited about. We should all help build awareness about the great jobs that we're creating and the positive impact we can have on our communities.
Great comments. I'm really, really excited for the future of my industry in particular, but basically, the overall economy is the big winner here. All sectors are really benefiting from this. Supportive industries of semiconductor plants and the construction jobs that go along with them. I mean, it is literally feeding upon one another, and it all rolls down to everybody wins with these initiatives. And I would just say that as policymakers in the room and interested parties, I would say let's make sure we're watching over and making sure that we're rewarding good behavior. In particular, when it gets down to the contracting industry, there is probably as many contractors here as there are workers to work there. And let's make sure that we're writing good policy and, again, rewarding good behavior and making sure that because it costs money to train apprentices. It doesn't add to your profit margin to add apprentices to your job site. Even the wages are a little lower, and they make a nice composite rate. They need more management. They need more attention paid to them, and they do impact the bottom line. And so let's make sure that we're making that contractors and the people building these buildings are being rewarded for good behavior. The more that they take on apprentices, the more they take on training roles, that they receive good favor. I don't know how else to put it, but making sure that they are being a spotlight on them for again good behavior. I'm not a negative guy. I don't want to say punish those with bad behavior, but there are those players out there, and I just would say as policymakers, we could probably write good policy to make sure that the good contractors are getting rewarded. But I'm so excited to be here. Sorry.
Great points. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to everyone who is still here listening to us. Hopefully we've wrapped up the day for you well. I'm going to pass things back to WGA to wrap us up.